Good afternoon and warmly welcome to Silverbucket webinar. The topic of this webinar is knowledge-based management by using Silverbucket. The webinar session lasts about 45 minutes, and after that, in the end of this webinar, you will have a possibility to ask me some questions in a Q&A session. Here is the framework of this webinar. That's quite extremely simple model how to manage by knowledge. The basis of everything is collecting data. That's obvious. Because without high quality data, we are just guessing. The next step in the process is to analyze the data that we have. It's crucial here that we have a possibility to analyze the data in many different perspectives. And then the ultimate target. We should be able to make better decisions based on facts. That's much easier when we have high quality data and excellent ways how to dive deep in it. And finally, the follow-up. Fundamental part of the process is to see the outcome of the decisions, to learn and to improve. In this webinar, I will show you how Silverbucket can help in different phases in this process. But before we get really started, just a couple of words of myself. My name is Tuomas Mikkola. I am the CEO of Silverbucket. I have been on board at Silverbucket since the day one. I'm one of the 3 founders. My background is on professional services. I was working together with the other co-founders in an IT company in Finland, and we were responsible of our own portfolio of projects. One of our duties was to take care that each and every project team did have a decent resourcing plan. So we had plenty of people, plenty of projects, and we started to develop a process how to keep track of this situation. For this purpose, we evaluated lots of different tools, some ERP systems, PSA tools, etc. But very soon we found out that the resource management was only just a side note in these traditional tools. So we were not able to find decent tools and ended up using Excel spreadsheets for managing the resources. And this was really the spark for establishing Silverbucket. We started to build a tool for project portfolio resource management, which we would have needed by ourselves. And here we are now. We have implemented that tool that we dreamed about. And we have also seen hundreds of different project organizations and their resource management processes. And this is something I want to share with you today. Discuss typical needs of top-level management, how to manage a company by knowledge instead of guessing. And how to ensure this? Well, at first, to collect the data. This is a typical high-level view to the resourcing situation in a project organization. The project managers do have their own resourcing plan for the projects. And also the team managers keep track of the situation of their own teams. Everyone does have their own spreadsheets of the situation. But this is, of course, not enough. In this scenario, the middle management or the top level management does not have a clue about the situation. And that's something totally absurd, because the top level management is making the most important decisions in the company. They decide whether to start the recruitment or if it's necessary to downsize the organization, or maybe decide if some subcontracting contracts need to be negotiated. These kind of decisions will be wrong, or they will be done desperately too late without an accurate resourcing information. So what's the solution? Well, obviously, we need to have one centralized database for the resourcing information. By using the one centralized database, each and every person in the organization is able to see the situation. The project managers see and update the resourcing plan of their projects. And same goes with the team managers. They maintain the situation of their own people. Everything is in one single location. At first, extremely briefly about Silverbucket. Silverbucket, that's both the name of the company and the service that we are delivering. The service is meant for project organizations to manage their resources. It is a cloud-based application delivered with software as a service model. Well, in practice, that means that all you need is modern enough web browser to use the application. Silverbucket is extremely detailed in scope. It concentrates on resource management process only. So it's not a wide ERP or PSA system, neither a project management tool for managing individual projects. In Silverbucket, it's all about people and projects. All the resourcing decisions are stored in Silverbucket database. For example, like Matt is allocated to project XYZ by half of his working time until the end of this year. When all the people and projects are allocated this way, then Silverbucket provides many different ways how to analyze the resourcing situation. But I know that the majority of the attendees today are already familiar with the Silverbucket main concept, so I will not bore you too long with the basics. Instead, we will continue this webinar by discussing some key performance indicators, KPIs, of resource management process. I will introduce the KPIs, and I will also show you in practice how these KPIs can be followed and managed in Silverbucket. During this webinar, I am going to describe 5 fundamental KPIs related to resourcing process of a project organization providing professional services. In a project organization, resourcing decisions are done on all levels of the organization. And resource management process must be able to provide benefits for all the roles in the company, starting from the individual employees to project and team managers, and finally to the high-level resource management and top-level management. But this is, of course, not possible if the data is not up to date. And maybe the most crucial question in the resourcing process is how to ensure that the resourcing plan is constantly updated, whatever information system is used. But this is actually such a wide topic that we are not going to discuss that any further. We just assume that the processes for maintaining the resourcing plans are in place. But the assumption in our webinar is that the organization is invoicing their expertise from external customers. For example, like an engineering company. The entire revenue of organization comes from customer projects. So let's go to the Silverbucket user interface and start going through that. We are going to start with overview graph and start by discussing the capacity. Capacity is this green line showing here in our overview graph. And the idea of capacity is that it is the theoretical maximum. How many hours is your entire personnel able to do during the regular hours? Here in this example, we can see, for example, that the capacity during this autumn is around 550 man days. Week by week, we can see what is our capacity in man days. But actually, in this webinar, we will use a relative capacity. Let's change that. So we use percentages. In this approach, the maximum capacity is always 100%. But then, let's start discussing about the actual KPIs. And we will start with that. The blue area in this overview graph indicates the total number of project allocations for the entire personnel for invoiceable projects. And now we have the first important KPI available, the estimated invoicing rate of the organization compared with the capacity. The invoicing rate is definitely the most fundamental KPI of a project organization. It pays the bills and salaries. In our example organization, the average invoicing rate is around 60% on average. But following the invoicing rate of the entire organization is typically not enough. Especially when we want to analyze the situation in more detail and to make some improvements, we need to drill down to the details, to different organization units, different sites, different roles, for example. You can use this people allocations view to analyze the situation, but actually Silverbucket also provides an excellent report for this purpose. So we are going to the reports and utilization rates. Well, to improve the invoicing rate, we need to be able to drill down in more detailed information. We can see if there are some differences in the invoicing rates of different parts of the organization. And this report gives you great tools for that analysis, to be able to analyze the situation in much more detail. So let's start by analyzing the resourcing situation by organization levels. Here we can see all the top-level organization units of the entire company. We have units like architectural services, business line 1 and 2, engineering services, IT services. Quite simple model here. And then month by month, unit by unit, we can see the future invoicing rates based on allocations made in Silverbucket. And we can actually use this very same report to analyze also the actuals in the past and allocations in the future. So if we change this report to actually show both allocations and realizations and change the start date maybe to the 1st of July. Now we can see the history of invoicing rate as well. This is of course really interesting information to know before setting any targets to the future invoicing rate. This report can also show the combination realized invoicing rate from the history and future invoicing rate based on allocations planned in Silverbucket. And using this very same report, it's also possible to see the invoicing rate based on different dimensions. For example, in our example, we have configured different sites to be the user groups in Silverbucket, and then we can see site by site what is the history of invoicing rate and what is the future invoicing rate. Same goes, for example, with different roles in our organization or by superiors. We can see the situation even on personal level using this very same report. In addition to this, we can also drill down to the details. If we want to know the situation of future invoicing rates of some individual organization unit, we can filter this report by that unit. For example, like this, we should select organization unit architectural services, and now we can see the sub-organization units of this top-level unit architectural services and their invoicing rates. This is, of course, fundamental in order to start improving. We know the current situation. We are able to see it in many different perspectives. When we know where we are now, then it's time to set a target for the future invoicing rate. By setting a target for the invoicing rate, we can compare the current allocations with the target. And in our example, the invoicing rate target is visualized as yellow line, and it is possible to see the possible differences between current allocations and the target. This yellow line is labeled as scaled capacity in Silverbucket. It is a property of each employee. It can be changed together with the person's basic information. The personal capacity in Silverbucket means how much of individual employees' working time is planned to be used to invoiceable projects. Then, in different use, the scaled capacity is calculated as the average of the invoicing rate targets of all the people, depending on the search criteria. So now we can see the targeted invoicing rate bottom up, employee level, team level, all the organization levels, and all the way to the invoicing rate of the entire organization. And now we are able to compare. What is the targeted invoicing rate, the yellow line, of the certain part of the company, and what is the current plan, the blue area? We can also see the history if needed. Are there some differences between the actuals in the past and the future invoicing rate target? So, what is a good target for the invoicing rate? Well, I would say that it strongly depends on the character of the organization. The most impressive thing is the typical length of a project. If majority of the projects last a long time, then it's much easier to target for high invoicing rates. Another aspect is the type of project assignments. If people are typically allocated full time to one project, that also makes it easier to keep invoicing rate high. But according to our experiences, the typical invoicing rate for professional services is around 80%. The project organization should live and breathe the invoicing rate estimate provided by these resourcing graphs. Whenever there are significant differences between the estimate and the target, it's time to make some corrective actions. This could mean to start to recruit people or to downsize the organization. The invoicing rate really is the lifeline of project organization in professional services. Then, moving on to our next fundamental KPI. The project organizations have, of course, also other activities, but the invoiceable customer projects. There should always be some time for development, both for the processes and for the people. New products or services must be constantly developed, and the administrative tasks always take some time. Now, let's reset our filters, and actually now we can see new color, new area in our resourcing graph. This purple area indicates the allocations for all the non-invoiceable projects. And the combination of invoiceable and non-invoiceable allocations gives us the second important KPI, the utilization rate. This KPI gives you an understanding how much people are employed by all the planned activities in the future. The utilization rate is as fundamental KPI as the invoicing rate. And obviously, these two numbers cannot match, or they can only match for a short period of time. There should always be some time for trainings and development. When the utilization is close or even above the capacity, we lose the flexibility for urgent needs. Another risk is to overload the personnel and cause some stress and other problems. So it is needed to have some gap between the invoicing rate and the utilization rate to develop the organization and to be prepared for the changes. Coming back to the same report that we already covered, the utilization rate. Actually, this same view can be used for analyzing this second KPI, utilization rate. We can use exactly the same filters and grouping options as earlier. All we need is to change the report type to be invoicing rates. Now we can see the invoicing rate of different organizations, for example. Or we can go to the role level. And also it is possible to see the actuals in the past. So we can use this very same view to show the realized invoicing rate from the history and what is the current estimate to the future. And once again, the future estimate is calculated based on the allocations made in Silverbucket. The actuals are either imported from some backend system or reported by Silverbucket timesheet feature. Going back to the overview graph. Well, of course, the personnel are not available throughout the year. There are always some planned and also unplanned absences, like holidays or sick leaves. Keeping track of the planned absences is also important to be able to get an estimate of the availability of the people and for the financial estimates as well. Because, for example, during the summer holidays, the revenue can be significantly lower compared to the normal months. And here we have a third area in our graph. The planned absences are shown as green area. And now we have our third KPI to be followed, the resourcing rate, which is the sum of invoiceable allocations, non-invoiceable allocations, and planned absences. We have stacked all the three basic types of work to the same graph. This approach gives us an excellent understanding about all the allocations that have been assigned at individual level. The resourcing rate in an optimal situation should follow the capacity of the organization. Typically, the resourcing rate should be at least 90% or even 95%. But usually it's a good idea to leave some time for the changes and not to target the resourcing rate to be 100%. And of course, low resourcing rate means unoptimal use of resources. Let's go one more time to the report utilization rates. Well, it's really a Swiss Army knife report. We also have a possibility to see the resourcing rates of our organization in different perspective with this report. We should configure this report to also include the absences in this project type filters. And then we can have similar kind of report like previously using our utilization rate report in Silverbucket. I'm not going to go any more into the details because using this report is quite straightforward. Then it is not always possible to fulfill all the resourcing needs of a project at the same time. And that's why it's necessary to be able to have the possibility to make some role-based reservations. In the next example, we have pink area here, indicating these pending role needs. And once again, we have a new KPI available, the resourcing demand rate. That KPI gives us the ratio between all the demands of all the projects compared with the capacity. The nature of the resourcing demand rate is different compared with the other KPIs, because the fundamental difference is that the target might differ over the time. On the ongoing week, there must not be any pending role needs, so the resourcing demand rate must be below 100%. But far away in the future, it's fully acceptable and even a desired situation to have higher plan for the resourcing demand rate. When there's more time to react, it's possible to recruit more people or use subcontractors or prioritize projects. If we select the latter option, we might postpone some internal projects to maximize their revenue. But to summarize, the resourcing demand rate estimates both the long-term plans and the short-term acute needs. Now, finally, it's time to introduce our final KPI. An organization on professional services never stops selling new projects. There are always plenty of projects in the sales pipeline, some of which are starting, some of them are not. But in order to get meaningful estimates longer to the future, the prospects need also be taken into consideration. For the prospects, the resourcing plan is typically built on high level by allocating only the required roles in the project team. However, it's also possible to assign nominated people to the project team if those decisions have already been made. So we have our final KPI here, the opportunity rate. There are actually two variants here. If we are able to estimate the probabilities of our opportunities, we can follow the weighted opportunity rate. In this variant, the resourcing plan of the prospects are scaled with their probabilities. The opportunity rate gives you an estimate of the resources needed further in the future. And this will give the organization even more time to react for the changes in the project business. So let's briefly summarize. We have 5 different rates, all of which are percentages, comparing the important indicators of the resourcing process to the capacity. We have the invoicing rate, the percentage of the allocations for the invoiceable projects. We have the utilization rate, allocations both for the invoiceable and non-invoiceable projects relative to the capacity. The resourcing rate containing also the absences. The resourcing demand rate, which contains all the resourcing demands that the projects have. And finally, the opportunity rate. In addition to previously mentioned, it contains also the prospects still in the sales pipeline. Moving to the next topic, which is actually a brand new feature in Silverbucket, strategic competence management. And this is also a part of analyzing phase of the process. In the previous example, we analyzed the resourcing situation with the help of different KPIs and drilled down to different organization levels, locations, etc. But next, we would like to analyze whether we have the right competencies in our organization. Before I introduce you the new feature, let's start by shortly explaining the concept of competence management in Silverbucket. First of all, I will go to Silverbucket admin view, where we can build the map of competencies. The data structure of competency management in Silverbucket contains categories and individual competencies. The categories can be hierarchic, but in our webinar, we simply have 3 categories on the top level: languages, programming, and planning software. And then we simply have the list of competencies. Each competency belongs to one category. Simple as that. So this is something that the administrators should take care of. Another requirement, the personal competencies must also be filled. And it's done with a personal dashboard of each and every person in Silverbucket. And it's done simply by clicking these oval symbols on person's dashboard. So we estimate that this person knows French language on advanced level and say Autodesk on level 4 as an example. So we have configured here these 3 categories, and then the individual competencies are shown here. And it's also possible to define some textual values for these competency levels. In our example, default, beginner, advanced, and expert. We can configure permissions in Silverbucket to enable rights to edit these personal competencies for the necessary people. It can be done by the employees themselves or by their superiors, or the HR organization can do that. But when this data has been gathered, then Silverbucket's new competency analysis gives you insight into availability of different competencies in your organization. And here is the main view of the competency analysis. It shows the top level categories of our competence map. Actually, the most convenient setting in this view is to use months and full-time equivalents. So let's change that. There we go. With this setting, we can see how many people in our organization do have certain competencies. The figure is shown month by month as this lower one. So, for example, we have 20 people with any competency under planning software, as an example. Then this upper figure indicates how many people with certain competencies are already allocated. Once again, for example, during September, 20 out of 20 people are allocated with some competency under planning software. And month by month, you can see the supply and the demand of different competency categories. Then, of course, we can also check the supply and demand of individual competencies. By clicking this category name, we can get the detailed situation. One by one, competency by competency, we can see the detailed situations under the selected category. Then comprehensive set of filters is also available. So you can run detailed competency analysis to different departments or different user groups, which can be locations or however you like. With this information, we have an excellent understanding about different competencies. Do we need to educate people? Probably some recruitments are needed. The competency analysis gives you factual data to make these decisions. Now, this is something that is not very common with the information systems of project organizations. When we have both project allocations and competencies in the same system, it's possible to make these kind of analysis of the competencies as a whole. That's valuable information to make strategic decisions how to develop the competencies of the entire organization. Then let's summarize the webinar so far. Based on the data analysis, we can make plenty of business decisions. Here are some examples of the business decisions we can make based on Silverbucket data. We can decide to take actions to improve the KPIs. Especially, this is one of my favorite examples. If we are able to increase the invoicing rate by single 1 percentage point, the impact is huge. I will let you do the math, but for example, an organization with 100 people can make 150,000 euros per month, per year more profit by increasing the invoicing rate just by 1 percentage point. That means that an organization with 1,000 people, this already means 1.5 million euros per year. Focusing the sales activities, when we know the availability of employees in the future, it's possible to take it into account. We would want to put more effort to selling for the departments with dropping backlog of future projects. Or when building the project teams for the opportunities, prioritizing people without enough future allocations. And finally, the competency analysis can be used to direct the recruitment and re-education of the employees. Then The last topic of this webinar. Silverbucket can be used to follow up the effects of the business decisions made. Let's take one example of this. I will shortly introduce a cash flow report which provides great information about several financial figures. But in order to follow the financial figures in Silverbucket, we need some background information. We need to know the project-specific invoicing model, if it's a fixed price or time and material, and in case of time and material, how does the price list look like? The hourly rates for people and tasks in the project. We need to have the cost price of the employees, and we also need some actuals, already sent invoices, and also information about other than personnel related costs. When we have this information available in Silverbucket, then based on allocations, we can calculate some important key financial figures as well. Let's go to reports and go to cash flow and select follow up, and then actually we could filter the information by organization, engineering services. And now we can see the list of all the projects belonging to that department. Then project by project, we can see the financial figures. Realization, how much revenue has already been generated. Forecast, the revenue still to come, and the total, the sum of previous two figures. Then the realized hours, all the actuals from the past, and correspondingly the future allocations and their sum. Also, we have information about all the expenses, both personal and non-personal related expenses. And now we can also see some advanced figures, like what is the average hourly turnover and what is the probability of a project. You can run this report to some organization level or for the entire company and see also the aggregated information. So what is the average invoicing rate? What is the average probability of the entire company? This is also something that's not too common, to have both the actuals and accurate future allocations in one single database. This approach makes the financial forecasts much more accurate. Unfortunately, it's quite common that the up-to-date information about changes in projects' allocations are not automatically reflected to the forecasts. There are, for example, several projects delayed, and we can see some unpleasant surprises in our financial figures. So this concludes our webinar. Now you have a possibility to ask me some questions, and you can do it with the GoToWebinar questions box. Please feel free to ask.